Hey, welcome back to the stash. Spider-Man 2. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2.
Talking back to me?
Possibly the greatest Spidey film to ever hit the big screen. With a cast in its prime, a story crafted with so much love and care, scenes that can only be described as pure Spider-Man beauty, and a score by Danny Elfman sent down from high above, this movie was simply generational, but it didn't just stop there. Now, a common theme within these types of releases around the time was the classic movie tie-in games. Man, how I miss these. Like, sure, a lot of them were hit and miss, but they all have a certain distinct charm to them that just always managed to pull you back in. Now, Spider-Man 2 was no different, and in 2004, the world was treated to this amazing gem of a release. That's right, Spider-Man 2, the movie game. I mean, can you believe it's been 20 years since this incredible revolutionary game came out? I sure can't. And with it being that old, there's a lot of questions. Does it still hold up? Is the gameplay really that good? Is this game simply overrated, or is it still, after all this time, one of, if not the best Spider-Man video game ever to release? Well, stick around and find out. So join us today as we take a deep dive into Spider-Man 2, the movie game, 20 years after its release. But before we get into that, I just want to take a quick second to say that any support here at the Stash goes a long way, so if you are new around here and you like Spidey or just comic content in general, feel free to stick around and maybe hit that subscribe button. But anyway, with all that being said, let's get straight back into the video.
Look out!
You interfere with me at that old woman's peril.
No! Look, it's Spider-Man!
Come on, Spider. Let's take this guy out.
Octavius! This time, go anywhere. Do anything. And stop Doc Ock.
Help me!
This ends now. Indeed it does.
Now, as there's a lot to tackle when it comes to this game, I'll get the long stuff out of the way first as we go over the story. So a couple years after the first game, Peter finds himself struggling to balance his civilian life with his responsibilities as Spider-Man. This severely affects his personal life. He's frequently late or absent for school and his leisure time with his friends Mary Jane and Harry Osborn. Later, while intervening a museum robbery, Spider-Man encounters the mysterious Black Cat, who manages to escape from him. She later returns and creates the more classic bond she usually shares with Spider-Man, helping him fight crime on several occasions. After doing some assignments for the Bugle, a massive explosion catches the attention of Spidey, so he rushes over to the scene and defeats the Rhino. Later, Spider-Man is challenged by special effects artist Quentin Beck to enter in a series of games designed to prove to New York he is a fraud. After Spider-Man beats all the challenges, an embarrassed Beck assumes the identity of Mysterio and leads attacks on both an opera show and the Statue of Liberty, which of course, Spider-Man stops. He then finds Mysterio's hideout and prevails over another series of traps. From it all, he learns that Mysterio is the true fraud in the process. However, with the use of illusions, he manages to evade Spidey for the time being. Sometime after, we see Harry introduce Peter to Dr. Otto Octavius, a nuclear scientist who was trying to make a fusion power experiment sponsored by Oscorp, which would provide an infinite power source to Manhattan. Octavius takes an interest in Peter and begins to mentor him throughout their next meetings. During a public demonstration Peter and Harry go to, a power surge causes the fusion reactor to destabilize. Octavius, as you'd expect, refuses to stop the experiment, which then causes the reactor to go critical, killing his wife and burning his AI inhibitor chip. Peter swiftly changes into Spider-Man and shuts the experiment down, destroying it in the process. Later, the arms begin to influence Octavius' mind, and thus he becomes Dr. Octopus. Blaming Spider-Man for the aftermath of his experiment, Otto becomes set on rectifying his experiment and robs a bank to fund it. Peter, who's luckily there with his Aunt May, suits up as Spider-Man and fights Doc Ock. Otto, as a last-ditch effort, takes May as hostage, forcing Spider-Man to rescue her while he makes his escape with the stolen money. After a long day, Spider-Man later learns that Mary Jane Watson is getting married to John Jameson, the son of J. Jonah Jameson. This causes him to reunite with the Black Cat, who tries to convince him to give up his civilian life to be Spider-Man full-time. The pair then work together to track down the Shocker, who escaped from prison during Beck's first competition with Spider-Man. They of course defeat him, but Shocker escapes after injuring the Black Cat in battle. Later, Spider-Man apprehends Mysterio from robbing a convenience store and unmasks him as Quentin Beck before taking photos of him for the Daily Bugle. But in typical J. Jonah Jameson style, he uses the photos to make it look like Spider-Man and Mysterio were in secret, working together the whole time. This finally breaks Peter, and he decides to confront Jameson as Spider-Man about the constant lies he publishes, but he is stopped by the Black Cat, who informs him of Shocker's return. After stopping Shocker, Spidey tells Black Cat that he must continue living a double life, which she understands, before going their own separate ways. Now, requiring a certain isotope to fuel his reactor, Dr. Octopus pays Harry a visit and the two come to a deal. Harry will get the isotope in exchange for Spider-Man, who he still blames for his father's death. Harry also informs Otto to seek Peter, who he believes is friends with the Wallcrawler. Octavius locates Pete and tells him to find Spider-Man, and he also kidnaps Mary Jane Watson. Spider-Man confronts Octavius and battles him on top of a train. Otto then sabotages the controls and ditches Spider-Man so he can save the passengers, which he manages to pull off after a huge effort, leaving him bruised and tired. Spidey then falls unconscious, allowing Otto to deliver him to Harry. As Octavius leaves with the isotope, Harry prepares to end Spider-Man's life, only to be horrified to see Peter's face under the mask. Pete manages to convince Harry to tell him where Otto is hiding. As Peter arrives at the waterfront, he attempts to rescue Mary Jane discreetly, however with no success. Dr. Octopus discovers him and they battle while the nuclear reaction swells. Peter somehow subdues Octavius, reveals his identity, and helps him return to his senses. Realizing the error of his ways, Otto sacrifices himself to destroy the fusion reactor while Spider-Man rescues Mary Jane, who now knows his secret identity. On her wedding day, Mary Jane leaves John at the altar and runs to Peter's apartment. She confesses her feelings for him. The two share a brief moment until they hear police sirens in the distance. Our game ends with Mary Jane encouraging Peter to go help as Spider-Man, and so our friendly neighborhood Spidey swings into action. The story has got to be one of my favorite things about this game, hands down. Usually with movie tie-in games, you get a few options on where you take the plot. Most decide to go the boring route and just copy and paste the movie's premise. Some, like the Amazing Spider-Man 1, treat it as a sequel of sorts and try to do their own thing, which I think fucking rocks, by the way. But then you get some where they keep the overall feel and vibe of the main story, while adding a whole bunch of cool and interesting ideas that normally wouldn't have worked within the movie's boundaries. I absolutely adore the direction this game took with its plot. I'm sure you all by now are familiar with the beautiful story that is Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, and the major part being Peter actually giving up his life as Spider-Man due to everything seemingly going wrong for him. It's the classic tale of when Spider-Man wins, Peter Parker loses. Now when we get to the game though, they flip the script, and what I mean by that is instead of wanting to give up being Spider-Man, he has to battle the temptation of letting go of his life as Peter Parker. Now, the Black Cat has a major role in this game, and the way she's utilized I personally think is perfect. She's there as the real anchor type for this game's plot. She instills the doubt within Peter's mind about his double life. She makes the good point of, hey, you've got these amazing powers, maybe try to enjoy them for once. What's the point of staying ordinary if you can always be amazing? And for a large portion of the game, it sort of hangs over Spider-Man's head. Just like the comics, as you swing around the city, you'll hear him talk to himself about his current problems and such. One major one he continuously argues with his own mind is about how much his life as Peter Parker sucks. I found the switch so interesting from the film when replaying this game, and it's almost like one of those cool what-if issues from back in the day. Black Cat's character in this was so much fun as well. Like I mentioned before, she plays a vital role within the story, and she poses as a real mystery for the web-slinger at the beginning. The team-up missions were great fun, and I love seeing the way Tobey's Spider-Man interacts with someone like her. Plus, this game introduced the classic Black Cat chase missions, which is now a staple within these sort of games. Felicia's overall design too was a great blend of the comics and their own personal flair. You got the classic black skin-tight suit, but they opted for a more shorter hairstyle as well as platform shoes opposed to the more classic white or black boots. I personally thought they did a really good job when it came to her design. It feels classic and new at the same time, as well as unique to within the Raimi-verse, even if she only appeared in the video game. I honestly love the extra foes we face within this as well. It adds so much more to the overall world Sam Raimi created, even if it's just for this tie-in game like Felicia. Seeing Shocker return was so much fun, especially being able to fight him in a team-up mission and having the blink and you'll miss a detail of him running away in the background after defeating Quentin Beck's first bout of challenges. It was super appreciated. Plus, his return adds this much needed connected feeling that goes beyond just the movies and more into the games of the films. In a way, it makes the trilogy of games, well, maybe we should exclude Spider-Man 3, have their own uniqueness about them, and I personally love that aspect within each title. The Rhino had a very minor role within this, but nonetheless, he was still very fun to punch around, and his inclusion was overall pretty decent. Not much to really say about him. His design was pretty standard, maybe a tad too much. I usually prefer the more basic, simple design like how Romita Sr. originally had him. Unironically, LEGO Marvel's Superheroes probably still has the best Rhino design in video games. Moving on to Mysterio, him being the second main antagonist of this release was an interesting choice, especially considering Bruce Campbell, who does the tutorials of this game, was meant to play him in Spider-Man 4. Quentin in this was pretty different from the comics. In all honesty, he felt a tad like the Riddler from the Arkham games, granted this did come out first, with his obsession of trying to prove Spider-Man to be a fraud and calling him a cheater over and over again. His design was really cool though, and his missions were all insanely fun and extremely creative. They really pushed this game to its limits when it came to his levels. Whether it was the creepy illusion world he traps you in, or going all the way to the Statue of Liberty, his evilness knew no bounds, and it was one of the most memorable parts of the entire game. I also found him really amusing, especially when you confront him in the convenience store. The way they hyped him up with his health bar seemingly having several rounds all for him to be taken care of with one punch was a brilliant way to pull an illusion on us the player. Now oddly enough, the character I was least interested in when it came to the villains was Dr. Octopus. I'm guessing it's because we already knew his story from the movie, so there was less of a surprise within his time in the game, whereas the new characters had nothing tying them to the movie counterpart. Otto's missions for the most part were okay. I remember finding them extremely hard when I used to play this back in the day, but then on my last playthrough I did for this video, I breezed past them all. I liked how much of a threat they made you feel he was. He backed it up too. If you got too close with him, within a second you're getting slapped around like Deadpool did to Wolverine in that one game. The train fight was pretty cool and the final battle was intense, but besides that I preferred hanging out with Black Cat. Harry Osborn and Mary Jane Watson in this game take a major step back compared to their movie counterpart, and in a way I understand why they opted for them to be in select scenes only. For a game that's only 4 hours long, I'm guessing they felt like it was a better move entertainment-wise for the player if they shifted the focus more to Spider-Man's life as opposed to Peter's. Don't get me wrong, his personal life is still a major part of the game, but like I said before, they switched the main sense of inner conflict from him giving up Spider-Man to him giving up his life as Peter Parker. I found Harry okay for the scenes he was in. I don't think they wrote him the best, and all I remember is him saying how he wants Spider-Man to be dead. Even when he found out Peter is Spider-Man, they just sort of brushed over it, and in a way it was pretty disappointing. But at the same time, with the context of everything, I still think it was maybe just enough. Mary Jane as well was a much more tamer version as opposed to a movie counterpart. She didn't even offer that much within this game, and if anything I found Black Cat way more interesting as a character but also as a love interest during the story. Both MJ and Harry were pretty one note, but you still got the idea of their roles and what they were like in the movie, which I guess was their main goal. But now it's time to focus on the main man of this game. The Amazing Spider-Man is portrayed really well here. Whether it's his personal struggles, him overcoming everything, or even the way he interacts with those around him, we got to see a version of Tobey's Spider-Man that the movies in aspects shied away from. Here he actually seems like when he puts on the mask he gains a sense of confidence he doesn't normally have as Peter. He even makes jokes in this, and rarely shuts up. Speaking of, a lot of the times where he's just talking to himself have got to be some of my favourite parts of the entire game. I mean, one of my favourite Spider-Man tropes is when he's just swinging around the city talking to himself. It gives us an insight to what he's going through, but it also really fleshes him out as a character. Plus, it adds to his relatability charm. Like, who wouldn't spend their time web-slinging thinking about if it's really worth it to switch cable providers? A lot of his time reflecting on his life mostly stems from his Spider-Parker life crisis, and after each mission, the new dialogue you get just adds more and more to how deep of an issue it is for Peter. It shows that it affects him more than just during the missions and throughout each break between levels where you just fight some crime. You're left with this tension in the air of if he's really going to permanently put one of his lives to rest. Spidey in this game looks pretty good design-wise. Maybe the webs were a little too thick and the red could have been a little bit more vibrant, but overall it captures the Raimi style in a very satisfying way. His Peter Parker look, however, really confuses me. Like, why is he even wearing his glasses? He doesn't in the cutscenes, nor did he in the film besides when he lost his powers, but when you roam around as Peter, he does here? I thought that was a pretty pointless choice, and the overall outfit is pretty bad in my opinion. Although I will say, besides Doc Ock, his model did have the best likeness in comparison to the actors. I'm glad they got that part right, because ignoring his clothing choices, that is without a doubt the most important part when it comes to the movie tie-in game designs, and they nailed it for me. Speaking of the actors, a few of them were able to reprise their role within this game. Kirsten Dunst returns as Mary Jane, Alfred Molina as Dr. Octopus, and Tobey Maguire as the Amazing Spider-Man. Overall, their performances for the most part were really solid. Alfred Molina managed to really demand my attention while playing through the levels, and he seamlessly transitioned from the movie into this video game. There's always a massive worry that when actors do these sort of projects, that they'll just phone in the performances, but I really enjoyed his return. On the other hand, I found Kirsten Dunst's return one massive mixed bag. You got some scenes where her lines were read really well and added a lot to the scene, and then other moments where I couldn't even really tell if it was her, but instead someone trying to do a bad impression. Tobey Maguire in this game just absolutely shines for me. In a way, these were an outlet for him to act out on an aspect of Spider-Man that he's always sort of been denied. I know it's been said to death, but I just really wish he could equip more in his movies, but thankfully he does so here with nearly every encounter. Sure, he had his moments of shakiness, but it never truly felt like it took me out of the experience. Now obviously for a game like this you can't always get all the actors to return for their roles, so recasting is necessary. Josh Keaton oddly enough has a thing where he's picked to play Harry Osborn for situations like this. I thought he did okay, but I think when it comes to someone like Josh it will always sound wrong when he's not playing Spider-Man. His Harry was also way more erratic than James Franco was in the films. There were times where his lines would randomly shift in tone without build-up and it was pretty jarring. Speaking of jarring, J. Gordon's Jameson. Well, he was certainly no J.K. Simmons. That's all I'm going to say about that one.
Finally, someone who hasn't been bamboozled by that media-grabbing glory seeker Spider-Man.
Before we move on, I wanted to lastly go over the performances of characters unique to this game. They got one of the greats when it comes to voice acting, John DiMaggio, to play the Rhino, and he honestly did a solid enough job. His voice really fit the model, and the only problem is, I wish they just used him more than one mission. Another voice acting veteran, James Arnold Taylor, does an amazing job as the Great Mysterio. Similar to how someone would play the duality of Spider-Man, he really nailed this version's more wimpy Quentin Beck and his more confident showman Mysterio side. Now last but definitely not least is Holly Fields as the Black Cat. If I'm being honest here, she easily stole the show for me. She managed to capture that perfect, alluring voice someone like Felicia should have. I really wish she did more as the character because it says a lot if one performance alone can easily make her one of the best to ever play the Black Cat. When looking back on the voice acting for this game 2 decades later, I'm left with a very conflicted feeling. It's not horrible by all means, there's a lot of solid performances here with a couple being really good and one being simply amazing, but you also got a lot of parts that just weren't good at all. Even back when this came out, way back when. From that stupid kid with the balloon to the "oh, the pain" line, pretty much every civilian voiceovers just don't do this game any justice. Or what does the game justice has got to be the gameplay. Oh my god, the gameplay. For something 20 years old, I had more fun playing and swinging around in this than I ever had in Marvel's Spider-Man 2. It's actually insane just how much they managed to fit in a game that released in 2004. So let's start off with the combat. Now I played this on the PS2, so you've got your basic attacks with square, your web attacks with triangle, and circle to evade. At its very standard core, you've still got a set of moves that's comparable to what we have now today, but where it really shines is within the upgrades. There's heaps, and I mean heaps of moves you can purchase from the upgrade system that just elevate this game to a whole new level. I'd always eagerly swing over to whatever shop I could find, just so I could see what new move I could unlock. You can expand on your normal square combos, you can add grapple moves, web moves, anything. Some of my favourites had to do with the web and grapple mechanics, whether it was webbing the thugs onto a lamppost or jumping as high as you can into the air to pile drive them into the ground. This game really has no limit to what you can do. To make it easier to dodge certain attacks, they added this spider reflex mechanic, or as I just prefer to call it, spider sense mode. In typical Raimi style, when activated you go within this flow-like state where all your surroundings suddenly go in slow motion, allowing you the necessary time to correctly perform a dodge. It's just insane because the depth within this game when it comes to the combat is something we haven't seen in a very long time. The only thing that comes remotely close would be something like Shattered Dimensions or Web of Shadows. Now the next massive part of the gameplay has got to be the web swinging. Ever since its release, this game for many years was hailed for having the greatest web swinging mechanics in any Spidey video game ever, and to some still to this day. Upon the release, this game in many ways was an innovator. Before this, Spider-Man's web swinging mechanics were clunky and very basic. As you probably all know by now, for a long time we were stuck with him just being able to shoot 2 web lines before falling into the abyss. And then it went to that same static animation, but this time he was able to swing for as long as you'd like in one direction. Here, they looked at that and laughed. You can do whatever you want when exploring the city. It's insane not only how big New York is in this game, but all the fun ways you can swing around it. When you begin a new game, you're presented with 2 options, an easy and a hard mode. Easy is, as you'd expect, way less skill is involved with the web slinging, although it is funny how that version of the swinging was the one to stick throughout the future releases. Hard mode is way more fun. It allows you so much more creativity. The first difference you'll notice is with the web lines. In this, you actually need to release the web manually, or else with the second tap you'll shoot out another line and Spidey will swing through the air holding a web in both hands. Just like the combat system, you can upgrade your web swinging as you progress through the game, whether it's your speed or simple air tricks you can do. With everything purchased, you genuinely feel like Spider-Man swinging around once you fully get comfortable with the controls. Overall, the gameplay is simply incredible, especially for a 20-year-old game. In many ways, it not only holds up to today's standards, but it also triumphs over a lot of new releases. The amount of depth within these 2 main aspects is something to just marvel at. Obviously, a game's most important thing to nail down would be the gameplay, and when it comes to that for this title, all I can say is it's truly something groundbreaking. This game is sectioned into 17 different chapters, although the last 2 are pretty useless. The main 15 all have 1 or 2 missions for you to complete, as well as certain upgrades to purchase and an amount of hero points to gather. You can get hero points through playing the story missions or by doing the side quests. For the most part, the story missions are all really fun, but with the exception of a few being really tedious. Chapters 14 and 15 immediately spring to my mind. Chapter 14 features the last Black Cat level, and for the most part it's business as usual. You chase her to a location, but then, due to the Black Cat's impulsiveness, she ruins the element of surprise and jumps in the middle of a huge black market auction, which causes a massive fight. There's these stupid mech things which were just one big headache, just from how powerful they were. You can only land a few hits before getting smacked in the face by one, and then you gotta worry about their giant guns and missiles, as well as the dozen henchmen shooting at you as well. I found the best way to go about it was just try to separate them as much as you could to take them off one by one, but even then, you can't afford too many mistakes because of how powerful they are. In chapter 15 we have the last mission of the game. I honestly think that this is one of the very few things that truly shows its age. You have to try to shut off 9 power sources for the fusion reactor while having to make sure that Doc Ock doesn't get too close, or else he'll slap you around like he did on the train before, while also having to dodge that stupid reactor zone thing like early in the game, which can become a real bother, especially when it's even shooting out beams to strike at you. Unfortunately, it doesn't end there as well, because they decided to put in a power source underneath the main platform, so you have to crawl against the wall to turn it off. It should be simple enough, but if you so much as touch the water, you have to restart the entire mission, and the controls are just nowhere near fluid enough for a mission this complex. A chapter I really enjoyed though has to be Chapter 9, When Aliens Attack. This section of the game is the main battle with Mysterio, and they didn't hold back at all. An aspect of Spider-Man games I love is saving the civilians, and here it's done so well. Quentin is causing havoc at the theater, so we rush over there to save all the civilians, destroy the robots, and then make our way to the Statue of Liberty. Seriously, it's insane just how much effort they put into this chapter. We can't even go to the island in modern Spidey games, but here it's a part of the plot. After we're done foiling Mysterio's plans, we then head to his apartment, which leads into the madhouse section of the game. Once again, they showed off their talent because this mission was so much fun. I love how creative they got with the set design in general throughout this chapter, but here in the madhouse, it got even better. Whether it was saving people in the theater or traveling to the Statue of Liberty, the creepy Mysterio watching you fight, having to battle weird mirror versions of yourself, or even the madhouse as a whole, there's something here for everyone to enjoy, and I certainly had a blast. The side missions in this game were pretty standard stuff. People around New York will call for help, and there's a number of events that will take place. It can be a holdup, a setup, purse snatcher, someone who needs to go to the hospital, someone about to fall off a building, and that stupid kid with his stupid balloon.
Oh no, my balloon!
But the coolest side mission you can do is deliver f***ing pizzas. For something that barely lasted in the film because he was always late, I love how you can just make him the star employee of the entire restaurant. It's such an unexpected yet oddly fun part of the game, it's great. Now the last thing I want to quickly go over is this game's graphics. I played this on the PS2 and it really shows its age. They're not that bad when you're just playing around, sometimes moments can look good, but at the same time it made certain parts of the game really difficult because Spider-Man would blend in with half the pixels. Where the in-game graphics fail, the pre-rendered ones shine. The mini-movies are great and a real highlight of the chapter whenever they show up. I was surprised to see that at least that part of the graphics held up as well as it did. Now when I revisited this game 20 years after its release, I was honestly worried that a lot might not age well and the whole experience would feel pretty disappointing. I'm happy to say I could not have been more wrong. For a game this old, it manages to capture something so pure and fun that most modern titles struggle to master. You can feel the passion and love put into the game within the very first cutscene all the way to the end credits. It's a blast to play, and if by some slim chance you haven't played this game yet, yeah, I'm looking at you, then I highly encourage you to do so because I truly believe that everyone, most of all Spidey fans, have to experience it at least once in their lifetime. I simply love this game, to its story twist from the film, the amazing combat and web swinging, to even everything about the cast of characters. This title, for good reason, is one of the best Spider-Man games of all time. It's a pioneer for the entire superhero genre, and 20 years later, it continues to show why it's an immortal classic.
Go get him, Tiger.
Mary Jane, the girl next door, the girl I love, and now the girl waiting for me at the end of the day. Fate handed me amazing powers, and with those powers came a burden of responsibility. Somehow, though, having her with me makes that burden lighter. Still, in the end, it's mine to bear. After all, there's still only one Spider-Man.
But that is it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have enjoyed, please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, because here, any support means so much. A little bit of an unscripted part for the end of the video. Yeah, I hope you guys really enjoyed this one. It took me a long time to make, especially the script. The script took forever to write. I had a blast revisiting this game. I didn't know really what to expect when going back to it, but I was so surprised to see just how well it aged, as I said in the video, and it's so much fun to play. I love everything about it, and I honestly just want to keep playing it. As soon as I'm finally finished making this entire video, I'm going to go do that. But, yeah, 20 years later, this game is still amazing, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Be sure to tune in next time, same web time, same web channel. Thank you guys again for watching, and see you in the next one.